Welcome to Beyond Tech, where innovation meets insight. I'm your host, Jackie Slatt. I bring curiosity, clarity, and a passion for technology-driven storytelling to every conversation. The life sciences industry is evolving faster than ever. As we head into 2026, pharmaceutical and biotech manufacturers face mounting pressure to accelerate innovation while maintaining strict regulatory compliance. Companies must modernize legacy systems, integrate advanced automation, and leverage AI to improve efficiency, all while ensuring data integrity, meeting global quality standards, and navigating workforce challenges. In this episode of Beyond Tech, we're diving into these industry challenges with three experts from eTech Group, Bob Patrick, Puneet Jain, and Nish Patel. Bob Patrick is the Vice President of Life Sciences. He brings decades of experience leading automation and digital transformation for pharmaceutical and biotech manufacturers, helping clients navigate complex compliance requirements while driving innovation. Bob is joined by Puneet Jain. Puneet Jain is the Senior Director of International Business Development at eTech Group. He brings extensive expertise in digital transformation, industrial automation, and smart manufacturing, helping organizations leverage advanced technologies to optimize operations and drive innovation. And rounding out our panel is Nish Patel. Nish is the Director of Corporate Development and Strategy at eTech Group. He brings a macro perspective on industry trends and strategic insights, and will be joining us for all of our industry episodes. Thank you, Bob, Puneet, and Nish, for joining us today. So let's go ahead and get into the conversation. What are the major trends that are shaping the life sciences industry as we head into 2026? Nish, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for having us on. At a 10,000-foot view, life sciences, particularly pharma and biotech, which is where we really focus on, are really at a crossroads of two forces. One, the need to sort of innovate faster and faster, and two, the reality of rising regulatory scrutiny. So on the one hand, pipelines are expanding, therapies are becoming more targeted, product life cycles are getting shorter. On the other hand, regulatory expectations around data integrity, traceability, and validation are also only increasing. And layered on top of that is this growing focus on supply chain resilience, especially after the last few years. And manufacturers are really rethinking how dependent they want to be on essentially single sources or longer sort of global supply chains. In addition to that, you've got tariffs, geopolitical risks, national concerns. All these things are essentially pushing companies to invest more in domestic capacity, really, while also maintaining some sort of a global footprint. And a lot of manufacturing today wasn't really built for this. Many plants are still running legacy systems that weren't designed for today's pace. And that's why modernization is such a key trend in the life sciences industry right now. That companies are upgrading controls, data systems, automation platforms, and not just to be more efficient, but also to be more reliable and compliant, while also being able to support faster scale-ups and also being more resilient from a supply chain standpoint. I think that's really not just a short-term shift. I think it will really sort of define how pharma and biotech operate, essentially heading into 2026 and beyond.
Bob and Puneet, are you guys seeing that on your front? I know you're client-facing. Does that match up? Anything else to add?
Nish has covered, most of the topics, but, supply chain resiliency is becoming a big topic in the industry, right? I mean, these are life-saving drugs. With the current geopolitical scenario, you're seeing a heavy capital investment in life sciences industry. Again, all driven by supply chain resiliency. And, along with supply chain resiliency, the regulatory pathway that is only becoming more and more stringent for good reasons, right? Drug safety is paramount. So I think Nish did a fantastic job covering all the topics around that subject.
Yeah, and just to add to Jackie, we talked about the regulatory requirements and so forth, and it's important for customers, again, they need to continue to have the sort of right to operate, right? So you talked about data integrity and so forth as we're developing these new technologies. This Industry 4.0 or Pharma 4.0, which I know we'll talk a little bit about here later in the discussion, it is different in this environment because we're dealing with that sort of regulatory pressures at the same time than some other industries that we do work in.
Yeah, so that kind of leads right into the next question I had in my notes is how are automation and digital transformation evolving in the regulated environments like pharma and biotech?
I was thinking about this, I've done projects at eTech Group now, thinking back to early on in my career and how those projects were executed. Even early on. Even if you go back, let's say, 15, 20 years ago, in a lot of cases, we were looking at systems that were sort of air gapped. So you'd have your OT network that was isolated from your business systems because people were nervous about connecting those two systems together for security reasons and other reasons, of course. So there was this sort of, conservative approach in terms of building out, these systems. And then we were very good at recording all of this data, be it alarm data, process data, whatever it might be. But then it just gets stored and no one actually does anything with it. I was actually reading an article recently, an ISPE article, and there's this concept of dark data. There was a number that was referenced in the article that talked about like 73% of all data collected just never even gets used, which is just mind-numbing, right? So that's kind of where we're coming from with regards to the industry. But, where we're at today is, our customers, our clients have seen the importance of this. And now that whole concept of air-gapped networks is a thing of the past, of course. Most customers are starting to go through this digital transformation journey. They see the importance of removing those silos, right? Connecting those systems together. That's kind of one of the initial steps, right, in this whole process, this whole journey, ultimately getting to the point where you can start to make real-time decisions around the information that you're getting back from this, again, plethora of information that these systems are collecting. So the whole idea of a digital plan is feasible. And the way customers are approaching this is, in a lot of cases, a phased approach where one idea, and we're working with some clients right now today in this capacity where they're developing pilot projects, where they're developing new technologies. So they're testing these things out, they're failing fast, but once something comes to fruition, now you can roll it out into, call it a GXP environment, but they can do this in a controlled way with, again, these pilot plants or pilot projects. So there's investment that's being made, towards this. And, we're seeing more of our customers looking for trusted partners that can help them, again, through this process.
I wanted to just circle back on it, that a lot of clients, they know they want to go on this digital transformation journey, but there really are so many different ways you can take steps to get there. So I think that's important to hit on the phased approach of trying it and helping prioritize what could be like a quick win or a good first step for clients. And like you said, having a partner along the way helps navigate the path. One of the other things that I think is super critical in especially the life sciences environment is the data integrity and the cyber resilience. So what role are those playing in these environments? Puneet, would you like to jump in on this answer?
Sure. So both extremely critical to operations, right? So, when you look at the two topics, they're kind of connected, but they're also separate. So if you look at, cyber resilience, it's more around security. If you look at data integrity, it's more around drug safety, right? And then, follow the news for last 15, 20 years where there has been a big effort to digitize and to go to the cloud for a lot of the business applications. I think there are enough examples in the industry where, big corporations they've had cyber attacks, they've had ransomware issues, and that have really taken down some of critical manufacturing operations. So overall, I'm seeing a huge investment in cybersecurity initiatives. And cybersecurity initiatives, they can range from many different areas, right? So typically they start with the IT/OT assessment, which will get them a pathway on how to make their cyber network hardened, right? So it could start with network segmentation, encryption, disaster recovery, but again, all of which around how do you make your plant secure from cyber attacks and any ransomware issues. But again, it's more critical in today's day and age, as Bob talked about, right? The more you automate, the more you digitize, the more you go on the cloud, bigger the risk on cybersecurity. So more investment is needed on cybersecurity side. It's something that life sciences has to be very well aware of, and they need to have strong programs around cybersecurity. Data integrity, on the other hand, right? That's your bread and butter, right? I mean, this is life sciences. anything that you ingest, anything that you inject, you want to be 100% sure that it's exactly what the label says, right? So, I mean, that's the drug safety piece of it. Now, again, linking it back with the cybersecurity piece of it, you have systems like MES, LIMS, CMMS systems, ERP systems. And the reason why a lot of the companies are investing heavily in a lot of these systems is because they ensure data integrity. They're ensuring integration at the equipment level. So that way you can reduce the number of errors. The data flow from your plant floor all the way to your business systems is seamless, right? But having said that, you also want to enforce a lot of integration across the system. So that's something we do with a lot of clients where you have these bolt-on systems, but then to ensure data integrity, to ensure that they are done right, there are a lot of projects around how do we integrate these systems in the back end so that the flow of data is seamless. And you have to worry about audit trails. You have to look at automated validation checks. There's deviation detection along the flow in the digitized world. So again, I would say integration is a big piece around data integrity, and with more systems becoming more prevalent in the industry, a lot of bolt-on systems, we have to have a strong data integrity program along the way.
Yeah, and if I could just double click on that too, given data integrity in general has always been important, but now more so than ever, it is even more crucial. I think from a compliance standpoint, regulators aren't just asking about what is the data kind of showing. They really are asking and want to understand how was it created, who touched it, how, can it actually be sort of trusted. I think what's interesting is the focus isn't just coming from regulators anymore as well. We're also seeing the same level of scrutiny from an M&A perspective as well. Cyber and data integrity diligence in general has almost become standard in pharma and biotech deals, especially because buyers really want to understand and really have the confidence that the manufacturing systems they're buying are secure, validated, and there won't really be any issues post-close. So I think that's really why cyber resilience in general has just been such a big topic.
Yeah, that's a great point. Wanting to go on a little bit more of a use case, can you share an example of how advanced automation has improved the outcomes for a facility in life sciences? Puneet, do you have have a story to share?
I can get us started. Advanced automation it depends how we define advanced automation, right? But let's take AI as an example because we keep hearing AI across the board, right? So if you look at how AI is getting adapted in life sciences, so life sciences primarily is broken down into two areas. You have the R&D aspect, which is where all the innovation happens, and then you have the commercial aspect, which is the commercial manufacturing aspect of it. So AI adoption on the drug development side is immense. I mean, if you look at a standard drug development process, you have thousands and thousands of pages of clinical data. Now, the way to speed up a lot of the review is to use AI on that. And we are seeing a lot of adoption of AI in data review, a lot of clinical data. There's a lot of AI that we are seeing used so that we can reduce the overall study time. So that definitely helps. And then when you jump into staying within the R&D frame, right, there's lab automation. So if you look at lab automation, I mean, the number of samples that a lab does, we are seeing a lot of AI and robotics working hand in hand to process thousands of samples. What used to be done by scientists one at a time, now we are seeing a lot of lab automation that has not been common, I would say, in the last decade or so, where we saw more of that in the commercial manufacturing, but not so much in the lab space. But we are seeing a lot of that in the lab space now. So a lot of lab automation and consistency, right? And kind of links with the previous question around data integrity, right? So the more automation you have, the more integration you have across the IT/OT layer, better your data, faster your data, right? And that eventually drives the overall innovation. So yeah, I mean, if I can pick the two things that we are seeing a lot of it's AI and robotics integration across the whole supply chain.
Yeah, and I just give a little plug because we had a previous episode where we got to speak with Sarah Hadid, and we had a great conversation with her about lab automation. So if you're listening to this episode, go check out the other one too.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Jackie, too, Puneet talked about robotics and specifically around labs. We're starting to see life science customers also think about other areas of their facility that maybe haven't been as automated. So for example, warehouse automation. So going to a fully automated warehouse versus traditional warehouse and actually thinking about the idea of, I'll call it fully lights out production facility. What does it take to get there? So the traditional sort of process control, which has been there for many, many years, we're very familiar with. We're seeing automation expand into other parts of the facility as well.
Yeah, that's great. Continuing on that trend, what technologies or approaches are helping the life sciences companies scale faster and smarter?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest shifts is really towards repeatable, standardized platforms instead of one-off solutions. I think a lot of standard automation practices and architecture really allow companies to bring on new lines or even create facilities online faster because validation frameworks do not need to be sort of reinvented. They're just being reused. In biotech specifically, I think modular manufacturing is also playing a big role. You got flexible skids, single-use systems, really adaptable controls platforms that can really be used to pivot as pipelines continue to evolve. I think it's been a real advantage. And strategically too, this just gives companies more optionality, right? They can respond to sort of changing demand without overbuilding or locking themselves into rigid sort of infrastructure. So we'll continue to see companies pursue these avenues, especially as they scale.
Yeah, one of the challenges that's facing not just life sciences, but kind of across the board are the rising cost, labor shortages, and supply chain pressures. How are these challenges shaping the investment decisions that clients are making? Bob, can you share some insight you've seen out in the field?
Yeah, no, Jackie, I think you touched upon it. I mean, life science industry is not immune to these same issues as other industries, are seeing. And there's technology solutions here to help address, some of these problems our clients are running into around, again, automation and digital transformation. It's interesting because Nish talked about the modular development. That's an area, that you can help drive a standard solution around, call it control libraries and so forth, to allow for, deployment of systems more efficiently. So that is definitely one area. Digital twins is another area. How do you train folks? How do you deal with change management? Can you test a modification to a system using a digital twin versus having to deal with taking equipment offline? That's critical for manufacturing. That's an area that customers can leverage. And then we talked about, lab automation, for example. So automating repetitive tasks where you've got very skilled labor working in a facility, PhD level folks. How do you basically free them up so they can focus on their higher value activities, right? So that's an area where we can help address some of these challenges. So those are a number of areas that, just to kind of touch upon examples.
Can you share a success story where automation improved the outcomes of a facility?
Two examples, actually. Bob just spoke about digital twin. Right now, we help a lot of life sciences customers build digital twins. So we have this very large manufacturing facility, one of the largest manufacturing facilities, life sciences manufacturing facility in US. And we did a DCS MES digital twin for them. Now, it's amazing how quickly they started seeing the benefits of that digital twin, right? So one of the first things, or their biggest use case, was for training. It took a lot of time for operators, engineers, anyone coming into the plant to get trained on DCS and MES systems. So with the help of digital twin, now one access to a twin, which is essentially having access to a plant outside of a plant, right? It's more accessible, so they're able to reduce that training time by almost 60-70%. And then when you look at from a technical standpoint, both from an engineering standpoint, automation standpoint, also from a scientific standpoint where you want to do yield improvement exercises, now you have a full-blown simulator to test out your changes, right? So earlier what used to happen in this plant was they have to get a shutdown to implement any changes, then test, validate. But now all of that can be done in a digital twin. So the amount of time that they're saving that increases productivity, plus they're able to test the changes. So there are no unforeseen circumstances, right, that happens. So that's one of the areas or one project that comes to my mind. The second project that is AI based recipes. So this is a new thing now, for one of our contract manufacturing customers. If you're a contract manufacturer, you typically deal with a lot of different drug products. You want to speed up the tech transfer because the faster your tech transfer, faster you can go into commercial production. Typical recipe for any drug product, right? Just to make a recipe or a batch record, it takes about a month. But now with AI, you can create that recipe or that electronic batch record in, let's say, a day, couple of days. Now, yes, there has to be validation and qualification, right? You have to follow the right steps and procedures to check it. But now you have condensed that 30-day of electronic batch record into a 3-day or a 1-week activity. So now you have completely transformed the total speed of tech transfer. So that is something we'll continue to see more and more because that has a direct impact on speed of operation, right? Again, comes back to supply chain resiliency and everything. But I think those two come on top, right? I mean, there are many more examples on business analytics and BI and data visualization, right? But I think those two are they stand out in terms of looking towards the future and how things are changing.
Yeah, I think that's both of those stories that you just shared. I think what I'm taking away is how quick, because it's both we're speeding things up, the return on investment, while there is a cost up front, you can make it back, I would think, so much faster than you used to be able to, just because it's saving so much time for the client in other areas, I guess, in either like the labor or the other things. So I think that's great. Thank you. And you did touch on AI. I think this is a topic that I've heard a lot about. I feel like everyone has. It's everybody talking about AI, want to use AI. What I am not sure of yet is, do clients know what they want to do with AI yet and like how to approach it, or do they like just see that the impact could be there but not sure necessarily how to implement it? Does anyone have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think AI adoption in general within life sciences, typically, at least from what we've seen, at least today, it's been very much upstream, like R&D, molecule discovery, clinical design, trials, and so on. I think in manufacturing, adoption has been a little more cautious, which makes total sense given the regulatory expectations around this. I think the current use for AI has very much been focused on trend detection, a lot of maintenance insights, really decisions around support versus autonomous sort of controls. I think as we kind of look forward to 2026 as well, I personally expect AI to be more of a supporting tool than anything, and really sort of helping teams analyze data faster and spot risk earlier in the value chain, while we'll continue to kind of maintain sort of the accountability around all of the data. So I think in regulatory environments generally, I think trust is what matters the most, as much more than anything else. So I think we'll continue seeing that specifically in 26.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is, not that it's not important in other industries, but especially in life sciences, are navigating the ethical and regulatory considerations around the AI adoption. Can you give some insight on how companies are handling that, Puneet?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of lines up very well with what Nish just mentioned, right? Life sciences is a heavily regulated industry, right? So anytime when you have heavy regulation and it produces something that has a direct impact on patient safety, you have to be careful with any tool that you implement, right? Not just AI, right? It could be any system. And if you see the evolution of systems within life sciences, right, they've all taken a very cautious approach, right? I mean, many years back when I started my career in the industry, MES was just coming up, right? So there was this concept of release by exception. And there are still companies that are very cautious taking that on, right? So now you add AI on top, right? Which is 100 levels beyond release by exception. It's right. So you have to be careful how you deploy these tools. You can certainly take aspects of AI to make your decisions better, right? But can AI 100% run the plant, now it becomes an ethical debate, right? That how do you control it? How do you make sure that you have the right policies? How do you make sure that you have the full life cycle control, the documentation, and how do you validate some of these things, right? There are a lot of AI models that are self-learning, but again, in a self-regulated or not self-regulated, but in a highly regulated industry, maybe self-learning isn't the best approach, right? I mean, if you have a certain recipe and a certain recipe works in a validated way, you don't want it to self-learn to create something else. That's not what you want to do. It has to be done very carefully. You need to have the right processes, procedures, and validation, right? I mean, in this industry, validation is a key word, right? If you're saying this is what you're doing and this is how it'll be done, then this is exactly how it needs to be done. So yeah, I think AI will become a tool to use for better decision making, faster decision making, identifying some of the deviations, but the deployment has to be cautious and very careful in how we get into some of these systems.
Yeah, well, thank you. That is very helpful.
Just to add to Puneet's AI comments, we just have to take a step back. Like he says, customers may not be ready yet to fully adopt AI, but there are things that we can do, or they can do, or we can help them do to get AI ready. So a lot of that has to do with everything that we've been talking about, through this podcast, about connecting these siloed systems, creating a unified namespace. How do we make sure we build the infrastructure that allows, again, these life science customers to eventually utilize AI in whatever capacity they may want to in the future? So there's a lot of steps. We talked about the phased approach that need to happen prior to AI adoption. Again, the sort of crawl, walk, run concept that, again, we can help our clients work through.
That's a great comment, right? Because we come across a lot of customers in life sciences, right, who are directly shooting for the stars where, give me something AI. It's easier said than done, right? So you almost have to walk into those sites and you have to start with, okay, what does your current infrastructure look like, right? Can it even support an AI deployment? Because again, if you don't have the right level of integration across that IT/OT architecture, right, then maybe AI is a few years out for you, right? So some companies are definitely ready for that. Some companies are at very early stages where maybe they should be more focused on better data integration across the whole IT/OT architecture. And again, we have a lot of experience and we do that on a daily basis, right? Where we go in, we'll do IT/OT assessment, we'll create that ideal architecture, and then we'll make recommendations that, look, these are the areas where you can deploy AI, or these are the areas where you have a couple of layers missing of systems, where maybe you deploy the systems and then you implement AI, right? So again, there's no standard approach. I think the approaches have to be defined by the individual architecture and what stage of that digital 4.0 journey you're at. Some are at a very advanced level. Some are starting out, somewhere in middle, but I think each one has a separate journey around what that digital ambition is for them.
I think that pretty much sums it up very well. Thank you, guys. I do want to thank you guys for taking some time and being with me today, helping me learn more about each of our industries. Is always fun for me. But I want to close out with a couple of less technical questions that are a little fun. So what is one lesson that you've learned the hard way in your career? Does anyone want to take a stab at that first?
I can start off. I think one area that I have learned, over the years is we have what I call sort of tried and true processes that we've had success with. Again, doing this for 3 decades now, especially when you talk about call it typical project execution steps, right? What you get is a lot of pressure typically around deviating from that, I'll call it system development lifecycle that we know works so well. And there's pressures to move things forward, keep the team busy, keep the project moving, in the right direction. But then sometimes you might skip a critical step, like you need to get alignment on a design and get approval from all of the stakeholders before you move forward with the development of the system itself. So I've seen this happen, more than once, where we kind of deviate from that, and inevitably it comes back to bite us in one way or the other, either with scope alignment or misalignment, I should say, or, creating tension, between the different stakeholders. So I think it's a relevant topic and something that, we put a lot of value on, and something that actually, to be honest, we have implemented into our execution structure as we look at sort of guidelines around like CSIA best practices and benchmarks. Following that true sort of system development lifecycle is really critical to the success of any automation project.
Yeah, that's a great example. Does anyone else have anything else they would like to share on that question?
Yeah, I could go next. I feel like simple changes are never really simple in regulatory environments, right? So automation is definitely fast. What Bob talked about, approvals are never fast. So small change can certainly kind of lead to a lot of paper trail. And so you want to be bulletproof as you kind of work towards that, especially in the life science industry here.
I agree with what Bob and Nish are saying. I think automation is here to stay. We just have to automate more and more, right? But again, it's to streamline the processes, right? Help with faster decision making, streamlining the process and speed.
Yeah, this is also one of my favorite questions to ask is how would you describe your job to a 5-year-old?
I can start. So I have a funny story, right? One of the books that I used to read when my kids were little, and they were fascinated with this book. I forget the title of the book, but I still remember the first sentence of that book. Big machines do big jobs. It was a book with a lot of pictures. Now, although maybe not appropriate for a 5-year-old, but it was more for toddlers, right? But the way I would explain to a 5-year-old is, you have big machines in a factory. So we basically help these machines talk amongst each other, and then we make products, right? All kinds of products. So that's how I would explain to a 5-year-old, right? So big machines do big jobs, and we help them talk.
That's a great way to describe it. I love that. Nish, you want to take a stab at it?
I was just going to echo that. It's basically preventing big machines from misbehaving is another way to kind of tackle. So
I like that. I like that add-on too.
So yeah, kind of from the kid's perspective, just looking at the automation engineer and thinking of like a typical what's a chore for a typical child, like picking up their toys, right? So what we do as automation engineers is provide the instructions and automate around how these toys could pick themselves up. So free you up for other things, right, in your day-to-day life. So do other things that are more fun, right? So what kid wouldn't be interested in a toy that could pick themselves up? So that would be a way to describe this, I guess, to a 5-year-old.
I like that answer too. That's great. Yeah, my kids are bad at picking up their toys, so I need this in my life.
I'm not trying to discourage that, by the way.
So the last question I have is just any topics that you would like to see us cover on future episodes of Beyond Tech. I'm always looking for ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I know we talked about a lot of different topics today, and I think more of a 10,000 foot level, sort of high level, right? I think there's opportunities, to bring in within, eTech Group. We have subject matter experts. We talked about Sura earlier on the lab automation side. There's MES experts. There's folks who are doing the work today that we're talking about. I think there's an opportunity there where they could talk about their real world experiences, like what's happening, sort of boots on the ground perspective. I think there would be some value there to, again, pull in a handful of what we call our SMEs across the company.
Yeah, that's great. We do have an episode I just recorded last week on digital twins. So it's not out yet, but it's coming. So I think that was a good one to have that conversation with Cole. Anything from you, Puneet, that you would like to see?
I think, AI comes to mind. We did spend some time today on AI topics, right? But AI is a broad topic, right? Maybe if we have narrowed down and give some examples on certain applications, right? How it works with MES, how it works with the different systems, built on some real life examples that a lot of our engineers are working on right now. But to make that as a case study and show it to others, right? I think that would be a good podcast.
Yeah, that's another great idea. Nish, do you have anything? I know poor Nish has had to give so many examples.
I'm running out of examples here. I think compliance was another one. Obviously, we've got a lot of experts around this. I think having some sort of a view on that would be helpful. I think the other thing is also just around domestic manufacturing. We're seeing a lot of reshoring activity. So obviously, we have a sense for how domestic, life sciences facilities are becoming more and more sort of flexible around their designs. I think it'd be great to understand that a bit more, but also really just foreign global manufacturing sites. I think having the different view on how are folks internationally also doing this differently, I think would be a good perspective as we kind of really become global on our side.
Yeah, that's another great idea. Thank you guys. That's all I have for you guys in my notes. But I do want to thank you for being here today and having the conversation. And
thanks for having us on.
Yeah.